The 1955 wheat penny, a small cent that by all appearances seems humble and ordinary to the untrained eye, but which can, because of its rare errors and peculiar minting mistakes, be worth an astonishing $4 million or even more depending on the exact circumstances, condition, and demand in the marketplace. And today we are going to talk at length about why this coin is so rare, what kind of errors exist, why such mistakes occurred during production, how experts authenticate it, why collectors compete for it, and why the story of the 1955 double-die wheat penny in particular has become legendary, all while imagining the various possibilities that have kept this small copper coin among the top treasures in American numismatic history. So let us begin by considering what makes the 1955 penny stand out from the countless billions of other cents struck by the United States Mint during the mid-20th century, because at first glance the wheat penny design itself is quite common, featuring the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the two stalks of wheat flanking the denomination 1 cent on the reverse, a design that had been in circulation since 1909 when Victor David Brenner's work was introduced to honor the centennial of Lincoln's birth. And in 1955 millions of such coins were struck at the Philadelphia Mint with nothing particularly unusual about them, except that a small batch of coins slipped through the presses with a dramatic doubled die obverse, meaning the die that impressed the design on the coin had accidentally received two misaligned impressions from the hub, creating letters and numbers that appear doubled and blurry to the naked eye, especially visible on the inscriptions Liberty and I in God We Trust as well as the date 1955 itself, and this doubling was so bold, so unmistakable, that even casual pocket change users at the time could detect it, and once word spread it created a frenzy among collectors. But what makes this even more intriguing is that the Mint, upon discovering the mistake, did not recall or destroy these error coins, but rather allowed them to circulate, which meant ordinary Americans could stumble across them in their change, and some did, tucking them away as curiosities, while others spent them without thinking, thereby scattering them into the vast pool of everyday money. And over the decades these error pennies became scarcer and scarcer as collectors snapped them up, graded them, and preserved them, transforming what once might have been only worth a cent into something of unimaginable value. And here is where the magic lies, because error coins are always fascinating, but few error coins are as dramatic, well documented, and widely desired as the 1955 double die, making it one of the premier symbols of how a tiny minting mistake can lead to immense value. And the possibilities surrounding this coin are numerous. For example, there are questions about how many were actually struck. Estimates range from 20,000 to perhaps as many as 24,000 coins being released, but the exact number is unknown, and that uncertainty adds to the mystique. Because any time rarity cannot be pinned down with absolute certainty, it gives collectors fuel for speculation, and then there is the question of survival rate. Since many of these pennies were indeed spent in the 1950s when they had no premium, and some have been lost, damaged, or worn down to the point where the doubling is less dramatic, which means pristine uncirculated examples are vastly more valuable than circulated ones, and this ties directly into the record auction prices that have been achieved, because while ordinary circulated examples might sell for thousands, the finest known uncirculated specimens graded at the top of the scale by agencies such as PCGS or NGC can command prices in the millions. And that is how we arrive at the mind-boggling figure of $4 million for the absolute best examples. Coins that combine rarity, history, condition, and collector demand into one irresistible package. But let's go deeper, because not all double dies are created equal, and the 1955 is extraordinary because of the sheer clarity of its doubling, whereas other double die cents might only display subtle doubling visible under magnification. The 1955 variety is obvious even without tools, with bold and overlapping letters that look like a shadowed ghost image, and that kind of dramatic mistake excites the imagination because it is almost as though the coin is announcing its difference loudly to the world, refusing to be mistaken for an ordinary penny. And then there are the other related varieties. Because 1955 was not the only year in which double dies occurred, There are double dies in 1969s, 1972, 1983, 1995, and other years. But none of them have captured the spotlight like the 1955, partly because of the timing and the circumstances of its release, as the mid-1950s represented a time when coin collecting was booming in America, with new publications, coin shows, and interest sweeping across the country. So when this era appeared, it landed in a fertile environment where demand was growing, and ever since then it has remained one of the ultimate prizes. But beyond the double die itself, there are additional errors and mistakes that can make a 1955 penny extremely valuable. For instance, there are off-center strikes where the design is misaligned, broad strikes where the rim is distorted, clipped planchets where part of the coin is missing, or struck through errors where foreign material interfered with the die. And while these are not as famous as the double die, they can still add considerable value, especially if they occur in combination with the double die, which would be a virtually unique and priceless combination. And it is worth considering the possibilities that such hybrids might exist, perhaps tucked away in someone's old change jar or inherited collection, waiting to be discovered by a sharp-eyed numismatist. And if such a coin surfaced, it could easily rewrite the record books, pushing the value even higher than $4 million. But let us also remember the psychological element of coin collecting, because value is not only a matter of rarity and condition, it is also driven by stories. And the story of the 1955 double die is captivating, with its accidental creation, its release into circulation, its discovery by everyday people, its rise in fame through word of mouth and media coverage, and its eventual enshrinement as one of the holy grails of era coins, all of which give it a mythology that fuels demand, and this mythology feeds back into the market, ensuring that even as other coins rise and fall in popularity, the 1955 maintains its iconic status. And it is this combination of tangible error and intangible legend that sustains its $4 million valuation. But let's also talk about the minting process itself to understand how such mistakes happen, because the creation of dies and the process of hubbing involves multiple impressions, and in the 1950s, before modern technology streamlined the process, the risk of a hub slipping between impressions was real, and if the alignment was off even slightly, it could create a double die, and normally such errors would be caught and corrected. But in the case of the 1955, somehow the die was used to strike thousands of coins before the mistake was detected, and once coins enter circulation, it is often too late, so the mint opted not to waste time or resources trying to pull them back, allowing history to be made. And this accident highlights the human element of coin production, reminding us that behind every coin is a process prone to error, and sometimes those errors turn into treasures. But beyond the minting process, we must also think about the economic and cultural context of 1955 America, a period when a penny still had real purchasing power. Candy bars could be bought for a few cents, and so the thought of a penny being worth more than face value was a novelty to most people, yet that novelty planted the seeds of coin collecting in countless young hobbyists who might find a double die penny in their allowance, sparking a lifelong fascination. And that generational impact explains why demand for the 1955 has remained strong across decades. Because those who grew up hearing about it or dreaming of finding one now have the means to bid competitively at auction, pushing prices ever higher, and the cycle continues. But to truly grasp why $4 million is possible, we must look at the upper echelon of the market, where wealthy collectors, investors, and even institutions compete for the best of the best. And in that environment, a legendary coin like the 1955 double die wheat penny becomes more than just money. It becomes a status symbol, a conversation piece, and a tangible link to American history, which is why when a gem-quality specimen comes up for sale, it triggers bidding wars that drive the price into the millions, and from there headlines spread, inspiring even casual observers to dream about finding one, creating an aura that sustains interest across all levels of collecting. And so the story loops back to where it began, with an ordinary-looking penny transformed into an extraordinary fortune through the quirks of minting, the power of rarity. Welcome once again to our continuing journey into the captivating world of rare coins and hidden treasures that lie within everyday pocket change. And today we are diving into another extraordinary story that surrounds the humble wheat penny, specifically the 1945 1-cent piece, which under normal circumstances would be considered common and only worth a cent or slightly more to collectors in circulated condition. But because of very special circumstances, rare minting errors, unique mistakes, and the extraordinary possibilities tied to its production and preservation, some examples of this 1945 wheat penny can be worth an astronomical sum, reaching as high as $6 million, a figure that sounds impossible for something so small yet is fully rooted in the incredible fascination of numismatics and the undeniable influence of rarity, condition, and story upon value. So let us begin unraveling what makes the 1945 penny, part of the Lincoln Wheat series, so legendary in certain instances, and why collectors are willing to pay fortunes that rival the cost of luxury mansions or classic works of art just to own a single example. And the first thing we must understand is that the 1945 cent was struck near the end of World War II, a time of intense pressure on the U.S. Mint to produce billions of coins for a recovering and growing economy. And because of that high-speed production environment, errors were more likely to slip through, and indeed some of the most valuable 1945 cents derive their worth from spectacular minting mistakes, for instance off-metal strikes, where instead of being struck on a copper planchet, a coin was accidentally struck on a different piece of metal such as a silver dime blank, a steel planchet left over from 1943 wartime issues, or even foreign coin blanks that were in use at the mint to produce coinage for Allied nations. And when such a mistake occurred, the resulting penny looked unusual, lighter or heavier in weight, different in color, and often caught the eyes of collectors decades later. And because these off-metal errors are so rare, they are valued enormously, with some authenticated 1945 off-metal pennies selling for tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. And when you consider the absolute top of the market, where wealthy collectors compete for the rarest possible specimens, you begin to see how the value could scale up into the millions. But beyond off-metal errors, there are doubled die varieties as well. Though less famous than the 1955 doubled die, the 1945 series did produce certain doubled die obverse and reverse examples, where letters in Liberty, or I in God We Trust, or the date itself show clear doubling. And while most are minor, a few dramatic examples exist, and when they are combined with pristine condition, such as being graded MS 68 or higher with blazing red luster by professional grading services, they can achieve values that shock even experienced collectors. And then we must consider overstrikes, instances where a coin was struck on top of another coin, creating bizarre blends of designs that defy logic but fascinate the imagination. And although extremely scarce, such errors from the 1945 wheat cent series are documented, making them coveted beyond belief. And the combination of rarity, story, and condition is what catapults certain pieces into the $6 million territory, because when one or two unique examples survive, the bidding wars among elite collectors push prices beyond ordinary comprehension, and the context of 1945 adds even more intrigue, because the United States was transitioning from wartime to peacetime, with resources shifting, presses running at unusual schedules, and new demands placed on the mint, all of which created an environment ripe for anomalies, and collectors today treasure those anomalies as relics of history. Each one a small copper coin, yet also a frozen moment in time, a symbol of resilience, error, and chance, all wrapped into one. But let us not forget condition, because while billions of 1945 cents were struck, the vast majority circulated heavily, became worn, and lost their original luster. So finding even an ordinary 1945 cent in superb mint state condition is rare, and when you combine that pristine preservation with an extraordinary error like an off-metal strike or doubled die, the coin suddenly becomes a one-of-a-kind jewel, and those one-of-a-kind jewels are exactly what fetch multi-million-dollar prices, with the $6 million mark achieved when provenance, condition, and rarity align in spectacular fashion. But there is another layer that adds to this story, and that is the psychological impact of knowing that such treasures can exist in ordinary pocket change, for even today, stories occasionally surface of individuals discovering old wheat cents in inherited jars, estate sales, or forgotten collections, and among those discoveries sometimes lies a rare error. Coin that instantly transforms from being worth a cent to being worth millions, and it is that possibility that fuels the ongoing mystique, for the 1945 penny is not just a coin but a symbol of opportunity, a reminder that history and value can hide in plain sight, and collectors cherish that romance as much as the coin itself, and so when a $6 million valuation is spoken of, it is not just the metal or the rarity being paid for, it is also the dream, the legacy, and the cultural weight attached to the coin, and this helps explain why the 1945 wheat penny, in its rarest error and condition combinations, has reached such staggering heights, and why it continues to be studied, sought after, and mythologized in the world of numismatics, ensuring that the story of this coin will be told and retold as long as humans marvel at the strange and beautiful ways in which mistakes can turn into miracles of value. And when we continue to reflect on the saga of the 1945 wheat penny, it becomes clear that the allure does not only come from the physical errors or the statistical rarity but also from the possibilities that still exist today, because hidden among old family coin jars, tucked away in boxes of change forgotten for decades, or sitting unrecognized in dealer inventories could be a specimen of such rarity and perfection that it breaks the current record, and the idea that an ordinary cent minted during the final year of World War II could hold the potential to sell for $6 million or even more keeps collectors searching, checking, and dreaming, and it is this endless cycle of discovery and hope that gives the coin its timeless power. For the 1945 wheat penny reminds us that history is not confined to textbooks or museums, but can rest in the palm of your hand, disguised as a simple copper cent yet carrying within it a legacy of mistakes turned into masterpieces, ordinary turned into extraordinary, and small turned into immeasurable, making it not just a coin but a story of chance, rarity, and value that will continue to inspire treasure hunters and numismatists for generations.